The shadows of the compound. What happens to children whose father spends his days drunk, frequently stumbling into gutters, while their mother is consumed by her market hustle, oblivious to the chaos at home? Growing up in a disorderly public compound, surrounded by immorality, endless quarrels, and harmful influences, Chidi, Nnenna, and other children face an uphill battle. In such an unstable environment, where care and guidance are almost non-existent, how will they shape their lives? Will they fall victim to the toxic surroundings, or will they find strength to rise above it all? Join us as we explore the journey of these two teenagers through their trials.
Like and subscribe.
In the bustling neighborhood of Nnenna Street, a vast public compound housed over 10 families. Each family lived in a single-room apartment, and the shared space became a melting pot of different lifestyles and behaviors. The compound was alive with laughter, arguments, and the smell of frying plantains and boiling beans. However, beneath the vibrant energy lay a silent menace that no one seemed to address. Among the residents were Chidi and Nnenna, two teenagers barely in their early teens. Chidi was 14, tall and lanky, while Nnenna, 12, was petite with an ever-curious mind. Their families were often absent. Chidi's parents worked long hours as traders in the city market, leaving early and returning late at night. Nnenna's mother, a nurse, worked alternating shifts, while her father, Mazi Chidioke, a very big-bellied man with a notorious love for alcohol, often fell into gutters after drinking and returned home covered in mud, shouting incoherently. His erratic behavior embarrassed Nnenna and made her the subject of jokes among other children in the compound. Mazi Chidioke's drinking escapades were infamous. The sight of him staggering into the compound, sometimes singing old war songs or cursing at imaginary enemies, became a routine spectacle. One evening, as Chidi and Nnenna sat on the cracked concrete steps of the compound, they heard distant singing. "That's my father again," Nnenna said quietly, her voice tinged with a mix of embarrassment and resignation. Moments later, Mazi Chidioke appeared, his oversized shirt drenched from a recent fall into a puddle. The adults who gathered to gossip near the communal washing area burst into laughter as he stumbled past them, muttering, "Nnenna, where is your mother?" he barked, his words slurred. Nnenna looked down, pretending not to hear. Chidi nudged her. "You should help him," he whispered. Nnenna shook her head. "He'll just shout at me again. He always does." Mazi Chidioke's drunken episodes became a painful backdrop to Nnenna's life, adding another layer to her confusion and unease about the world around her. When he was sober, he was kind and full of stories about his youth, but those moments were rare. Mazi Chidioke's drunken antics, combined with the questionable behaviors of other adults in the compound, painted a chaotic and unstable picture for the children. Whispered conversations and flirtatious exchanges between married men and single women were commonplace. Late at night, muffled sounds of illicit meetings echoed through the thin walls. During the day, women gossiped loudly about their escapades, unbothered by the presence of younger ears. One evening, as Mazi Chidioke dozed off on the veranda, clutching an empty bottle of gin, Chidi and Nnenna sat nearby, observing their neighbors. Nnenna stared at the adults, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Do you think they're doing something wrong?" Nnenna asked, pointing subtly at two neighbors engaged in a secretive conversation by the mango tree. Chidi shrugged. "I don't know. But Mama always says to mind my business." Despite their uncertainty, the sights and sounds left a mark on their young minds. They began to mimic what they saw, starting innocently with teasing and playful gestures. Over time, the line between curiosity and action blurred. One humid afternoon, Chidi and Nnenna were seated by the window of one of the tenants' rooms. They heard strange, loud sounds coming from the television. Intrigued, they decided to peep through the slightly open window. What they saw left them marveling. The screen displayed scenes they had never encountered before, images of adults engaged in intimate acts, played openly without shame or discretion. The tenant, a man in his 30s, seemed completely unbothered as he watched. Chidi and Nnenna froze, unable to tear their eyes away. Their curiosity overpowered their sense of propriety. They continued to watch in silence, their young minds trying to process what they were seeing. When the tenant suddenly shifted in his seat, Chidi tugged at Nnenna's sleeve. "Let's go before he catches us," he whispered. Reluctantly, Nnenna nodded, and they slipped away unnoticed. But the images lingered in their minds, adding another layer to their growing confusion about right and wrong. Another influence came from the unfiltered conversations of the women in the compound. They often gathered in groups near the communal washing area, sharing exaggerated tales of their personal lives. Chidi and Nnenna frequently overheard these discussions as they played nearby. One afternoon, Nnenna tugged on Chidi's arm. "Listen to what Auntie Ephema is saying." They both crouched behind a stack of firewood, straining to hear. Auntie Ephema, with a dramatic flair, was recounting her latest romantic conquest. "He couldn't resist me," she boasted, laughing. "Men are so easy to control if you know what to do." The other women laughed along, offering their own advice and anecdotes. For Chidi and Nnenna, these conversations became an unintended source of education, shaping their perceptions of relationships in ways they didn't fully understand. A significant influence came from Uncle Chidi, a bachelor in his early 40s who frequently had late-night visitors. His room was adjacent to Chidi's, and the thin walls did little to conceal the activities inside. One night, Chidi was awoken by the sound of laughter and murmured voices. Curious, he tiptoed to the shared wall and pressed his ear against it. He could hear Uncle Chidi and his visitor engaging in flirtatious banter, followed by muffled sounds that Chidi didn't entirely comprehend but found intriguing. The next morning, Chidi whispered to Nnenna about what he'd heard. "I think Uncle Chidi had someone over last night. They were laughing and talking for hours." Nnenna's eyes widened. "Do you think they were doing what we see on TV?" Chidi shrugged. "Maybe. Adults are always doing those things." These experiences, though fragmented and incomplete, pieced together a distorted understanding of relationships for the two teenagers. One rainy afternoon, the compound lay still, enveloped in an unusual silence. Chidi and Nnenna found themselves alone in a secluded corner, the heavy rain creating a veil of privacy. The downpour muffled the outside world, leaving only the rhythmic sound of raindrops on the rooftops. Nnenna hesitated, her voice trembling. "Do you think what we are about to do is wrong?" Chidi looked away, avoiding her gaze. "Maybe. But everyone does it here. Even Uncle Chidi and Aunt Ngozi. They're not married, but they always sneak off together." "But they're adults," Nnenna whispered, her expression filled with doubt and guilt. "We're not supposed to do this." Chidi nodded but said nothing, his silence fueling the unease that hung between them. Despite their hesitation, curiosity and youthful impulsiveness pushed them forward. They convinced themselves it wasn't truly wrong. After all, it was what they saw others do all the time. When they finally acted, Nnenna's cry of pain pierced the stillness. She recoiled, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do it again," she sobbed, her voice filled with anguish. Chidi agreed, guilt weighing on him. Yet, despite their remorse, the forbidden act drew them back, the cycle repeating as their innocence faded into confusion and regret. One day, as they sat together in Chidi's family's room, Nnenna's mother unexpectedly returned home. The sound of her footsteps sent a jolt through them. "Nnenna," her mother called. "Are you here?" Panic-stricken, Nnenna whispered, "What do we do?" Chidi quickly pointed to the wardrobe. "Hide there." Nnenna barely squeezed herself inside before her mother entered. The older woman eyed Chidi suspiciously. "Have you seen Nnenna?" Chidi shook his head. "No, Ma. I think she went to buy something." Satisfied, Nnenna's mother left, and Nnenna emerged from her hiding place, her heart pounding. "We need to stop," she said, her voice trembling. But days later, the cycle resumed. One quiet afternoon at school, after classes had ended and most students had gone home, Chidi and Nnenna decided to linger. The classrooms were empty, and the silence felt both thrilling and dangerous. They chose a secluded classroom at the far end of the school block. "No one will find us here," Chidi whispered as they slipped inside and closed the door behind them. Nnenna glanced around nervously. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Before Chidi could respond, a faint sound outside the classroom caught their attention. It was the distant shuffle of footsteps. Nnenna froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Chidi nodded, his eyes wide. The sound grew louder, and they realized it was the school security guard making his evening rounds. "We need to leave," Chidi said urgently. He gestured toward the window. "Come on, let's go." They quickly opened the window and slipped out just as the guard's flashlight beam swept across the classroom. Hearts racing, they crouched behind a row of bushes until the guard moved on. Once the coast was clear, they ran out of the school compound and didn't stop until they reached the safety of their homes. "That was too close," Nnenna said, breathless. Chidi nodded in agreement. "Maybe we should stop." But the pull of their forbidden curiosity remained. The culmination of their misguided curiosity occurred one evening when Mazi Chidioke stumbled upon Chidi and Nnenna in a compromising position behind the communal bathrooms. His booming voice, despite its drunken slur, drew the attention of the entire compound. "What is this nonsense?" he shouted, staggering toward them. Nnenna froze in fear as her father's angry glare bore into her. The noise brought other adults running, including Chidi's mother and Nnenna. Mazi Chidioke pointed a shaky finger at the two children. "Is this what you've been doing while I'm not around? Disgracing me in front of everyone?" Nnenna wasted no time in amplifying the commotion. "This is what happens when parents don't control their children. Look at them. They've been watching us and copying our behaviors." Chidi's mother, mortified, turned to him. "Where did you learn this?" she demanded. Chidi's response silenced the crowd. "From all of you," he said boldly. "We see what you do. We hear what you say." Nnenna nodded in agreement, tears streaming down her face. "It's true. Everyone here acts like this. Even you, Papa," she added, her voice trembling. Mazi Chidioke's anger faltered, replaced by a look of shame as the weight of her words sunk in. The adults exchanged uneasy glances, their culpability laid bare by the children's innocent yet damning observations. After the disgraceful incident that exposed Chidi and Nnenna's actions, their parents realized the need for intervention beyond reprimands. They reached out to Dr. Amaka, a seasoned psychologist known for her ability to handle sensitive issues with tact and empathy. Dr. Amaka arrived at the compound on a sunny afternoon. She gathered Chidi, Nnenna, their parents, and a few other concerned adults in the central courtyard. With a warm yet firm tone, she addressed everyone. Children are a reflection of their environment. When the foundation is flawed, their choices mirror that. She spoke directly to Chidi and Nnenna, explaining the importance of understanding boundaries and resisting negative influences. Then, turning to the adults, she emphasized their role in shaping a healthier environment. Through engaging discussions and practical advice, Dr. Amaka helped the entire compound confront their behaviors and commit to change. The visit marked the beginning of a transformation in the neighborhood. Despite the psychologist's guidance, Nnenna's parents concluded that leaving the compound was the best way to start afresh. On a cool Saturday morning, as a moving truck arrived to load their belongings, the usually jovial Mazi Chidioke stood unusually still, his face reflecting regret and contemplation. For the first time in a long while, he appeared genuinely sober. He placed a gentle hand on Nnenna's shoulder, his voice low but sincere. "I'm sorry for everything," he murmured, his eyes misty with unspoken guilt. Nnenna nodded silently, her emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. She fought back tears, clutching her small bag tightly as if holding on to some semblance of control. When the truck began its slow departure, she turned back one last time to see Chidi standing at his window, waving faintly. Nnenna raised her hand in response, her heart heavy with the weight of goodbyes yet hopeful for the promise of a fresh start. In the days that followed, the compound began to transform. The adults, inspired by the wake-up call of Nnenna's departure, made deliberate efforts to be better role models.
Like and subscribe.